Hi class. I want to make this video because what I want to do is I want to talk about thesis statements and what you need to do to write a really good, strong thesis statement for your paper. So some of you have not turned in good, strong theses, or you've turned in papers without a thesis. So I want to go over this. Now, I am in Rules for Writers, in revising a working thesis on page 9, and also drafting a working thesis on page 8. And I'm going to be going all the way until page 11 to talking about a thesis. So you can take a look at this in your Rules for Writers under 1C, draft and revise a working thesis. So first, let's talk about what makes a good thesis. First, you need to state a position that needs to be explained and supported. Use concrete language and be sharply focused. Let your readers know what to expect. Be appropriate for the length requirements of the assignment, not too broad and not too narrow, and stand up to the what if test. I'm sorry, so what test. And we're going to talk about that in a minute too. But when you're drafting a thesis, in the beginning, what you have is what is known as a working thesis. So it's a good place to start because it just answers your question of your essay or whatever it is that you're talking about in your topic. But it's not enough just to answer the question, because you have to answer the what and so what question. So here, a stronger thesis gives a reason after answering the question. It's a stronger thesis, but still not enough for a really well-developed paper and the papers that you're expected to write in this class. So a good thesis gives a specific position, and you have to know what evidence you have to support your thesis and the position that you're taking. So if you are having difficulty writing a thesis, it may be that you didn't do enough research for your paper and you didn't have enough ideas to talk about that you could take a position. So you can only take a position if you have evidence to back it up. And so a really good thesis needs to have that in order for it to be successful. So there's a few common problems with thesis statements, and if you've ever gotten back that your thesis is not strong enough for your paper, this is what this means, or if it's not developed enough. The first common problem is that the thesis statement is a fact. So just giving a fact, the first polygraph was developed by Dr. John Larson in 1921, is not a thesis because it's not taking a stand, it's not answering any questions. So a revised thesis would be, because the polygraph has not been proved reliable, even under controlled conditions, its use by private employees should be banned. That's taking a stand, and it's something that you could support. Another problem with a thesis is that it just poses a question and it's not enough as a thesis. Would John F. Kennedy have continued to escalate the war in Vietnam if he had lived? The revision would be, although President John F. Kennedy sent the first American troops to Vietnam before he died, an analysis of his foreign policy suggests that he would not have escalated the war if he had lived. So if you have proof to back that up and you could take that position, that's a really good thesis. Another problem with the thesis is too broad. Mapping the human genome has many implications for health and science. So it's too general and too broad. So a revision could be, although scientists can now detect genetic dispositions for specific diseases, policymakers should establish clear guidelines about whom to test and under what circumstances. So this is something that could be argued and take a position with, and it's narrowing the ideas down, and it's not so general. But sometimes some theses could be too narrow. A person who carries a genetic mutation linked to a particular disease might or might not develop that disease. Okay, it's too narrow, and so you have to stretch it out a little bit. Though positive results in genetic tests do not guarantee that the disease will develop, such results can cause psychological trauma. Genetic testing should therefore be avoided if possible. Another problem is that the thesis is too vague. the Vietnam Veterans Memorial is an interesting structure. So you would have to revise it by inviting visitors to see their own reflections in the wall. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial created a link between the present and the past. So as you can see, all of these revisions give a much clearer picture of the position that the writer is taking. So you are taking a position in a thesis. You are not expressing an opinion. An opinion is a personal preference that does not answer any questions or is not arguable. So your personal preferences and your opinions cannot be enough for a thesis. A thesis actually takes a stand on something that has facts. You also put your working thesis to the so what test. So why would readers want to read an essay with this thesis? How would you respond to a reader who hears your thesis and asks, so what? Why does it matter? Will any readers disagree with this thesis? If so, how might you revise in response? Is your thesis too obvious? You cannot come up with the counterpositions that oppose your own, considering revising your thesis. So those questions are really important before you turn in an essay, to ask these questions about your thesis. And you can write a much more clear picture. You can create much more clear picture for your reader. Now, when you're writing an informal outline just to yourself, you can kind of do this to draft your ideas in the beginning. But when you're turning in essays, you have to have a formal outline, and you have to have a formal thesis, and it has to take a position and a side. So it's really important that your thesis is broad enough for the whole paper, and it takes on a position and as a side. So you can look at this part of Rules for Writers. If it's not enough to help you and you need more help on putting together a thesis statement, one of the things you can do is add more research to your papers and your ideas, because the research might help you develop a better position if you see like a pattern in what you're reading. Another thing you might do is work with someone and go to the writing center and have them look at your thesis and see if it fulfills the needs of a thesis. So this class and all your writing classes, you're expected to put together a really good thesis. And I hope you at least take advantage of some of those questions that are in Rules for Writers to help you form a better thesis. Okay?